Let's get back to work. This is video 2 for Unit 5, Lesson 3, Student-Facing Tasks. You should have already watched video 1 and be ready for the problem that says, Jada has some dimes and quarters that had a total value of $12.50. The relationship between the number of dimes, D, and the number of quarters, Q, can be expressed by the equation 0.1D plus 0.25Q equals 12.5. Uh-oh, look, when I printed that, the equation got broken up. I want to keep it together in one line. Equals 12.5. Anyway, there we go. Now, in this problem, we are going to learn that sometimes we can choose which variable is the independent variable and which variable is the dependent variable. They gave us two variables. They gave us dimes, D. Ooh, that's smeared. I don't like that highlighter. They gave us dimes, D, and quarters, Q. So we have two variables. Which one do you think is going to be independent and which one do you think is going to be dependent? Well, does the number of dimes depend on the number of quarters? Does the number of quarters depend on the number of dimes? Sometimes you can choose which one you're going to use as the independent or dependent variable. Because sometimes either variable could be the independent variable. Sometimes either one of them makes sense as the independent. Okay, there's 6 things to do. So this is a pretty long one on your worksheet. It's not going to be possible to do it in this little area down here. So go back to your math notebook and go to the next page. Write the title on your page. Lesson 3. And it's activity 3, so that's lesson 3, activity 3 on your paper. And then put a title on there, dimes and quarters. And we don't want to write down all this stuff again, but we will write the given information. So what they tell us is she has a total of $12.50. And I'm not sure what we need to do with that yet, but I'm just going to make sure I write that down. They tell us that there is a relationship between dimes, which are D, so D equals dimes, and Q, which equals quarters. Quarters. Oh, by the way, it's not the value of the dimes, it's the number of dimes and number of quarters. Okay, so now we know what D and Q are. Those are our variables. We know what they stand for. They've given us this equation right here. 0.1D plus 0.25Q equals 12.5. Do you know where these numbers come from? You probably know that very well when we did the assignment Pocket Full of Change. It was very similar to this. 12.5 represents $12.50, which is the total amount of money she has. 0.1 represents the value of 1 dime. It's 10 cents. And 0.25 represents the value of a quarter, 25 cents. So if you take the value of a dime, 0.1, multiply times the number of dimes, which is D, then this first term gives you the value of her dimes. Next, if you take the number of quarters, Q, and multiply that by the value for each quarter, 25 cents, 0.25, then this term gives you the value of her quarters. So that's the money she has in dimes plus the money she has in quarters equals, and then this term is the total amount of money she has. Okay, so that's where the equation comes from, and you are familiar with that from quarter 3. On the computer, it says, if Jada has 4 quarters, how many dimes does she have? And that is question 1 in your worksheet. So I'm going to label it 1 in my notebook. If Jada has 4 quarters, then Q equals 4. And how many dimes does she have? Well, I'm going to have to solve the equation for dimes. So I substitute in the value of Q, and that's 4. So here's Q in the equation, but I substitute in 4 because she has 4 quarters. And that equals 12.5. Okay, now do the math and solve for D. Here's what we have to do. Eliminate parentheses, so multiply, and you get 0.1D plus 1.00 equals 12.5. Then you subtract 1 from both sides. You get 0.1D equals 11.5. And if you're not good at solving equations, you have to go back to solving 1-step, 2-step, and solving multiple-step equations. You can get a lot of practice in Khan Academy or go back to quarter 3 assignments. Anyway, I'm assuming that you know that and you're good at that by now, so I'll just keep going. Next step, divide by 0.1. You have to divide both sides by 0.1 in order to isolate the D. You can show it on your paper, but I'm pretty good at this. I can just do it in my head. Now I know the number of dimes is 115. I solved the equation for the dimes. Okay, oops, I've got to enter my answer. It gives additional instructions for entering your answer. Do not include the units, dimes, in your answer. So it means don't type in 115 dimes. Don't type in that word. Only type in 115 and submit your answer. Question 2. If Jada has 10 quarters, how many dimes does she have? So now Q equals 10. Let's solve for the number of dimes. Do the same thing again. Write down your equation. Substitute in 10 for the number of quarters, right there, 10. And then we're going to solve for D. Well, I'm pretty good at this. I can do it in my head, actually. Plus, I practiced before the video. 2.5 times 10, not 2.5, 0.25. 0.25 times 10 is 2.5. So I have to subtract 2.5 from both sides. That'll give me 10 on the right-hand side and 0.1D on the left side. Then I have to divide both sides by 0.1 to isolate the D. And after that, I get D equals 100. It means when she has 10 quarters, she has 100 dimes. Type it in, but don't write 100 dimes. Just type in 100. I go pretty fast because I have a lot of experience at this, but it's really important that you pause the video and try it on your own. Let's answer the next question. Is the number of dimes a function of the number of quarters? Oh, I think so. The number of dimes depends on how many quarters there are. So yeah, it's a function of the number of quarters. Back to the paper. That was number 3. And now we're on to, oh, hold on. Okay, we answered the top part of number 3. It says, is the number of dimes a function of the number of quarters? And I said yes. Now, if yes, I have to follow the next direction. If yes, write a rule that you can use to determine the output D from a given input Q. Oh, I have to write a rule. This part's a little harder. So I said, yes, the number of dimes is a function of the number of quarters. The number of dimes depends on how many quarters. In number 1 and 2, we had an input of the number of quarters. Number of quarters equals 4. And the second input was number of quarters equals 10. The output was the number of dimes. Now I have to write an equation that tells me the number of dimes depending on the input number of quarters. Any idea what to do? I know. I'm going to write the original equation. This is the original equation. I'm going to rearrange the original equation to solve for D, but I'm not putting in anything for Q. I'm going to leave Q as a variable. So I'll subtract the Q term to get it to the other side of the equation. So minus 0.25Q on both sides. That gives me 0.1D equals 12.5 minus 0.25Q. Okay, all I did was move this term to the other side of the equation. Now I want to isolate the D. I can do that by dividing away this 0.1. But I have to do that to both sides of the equation. So I'm going to divide the left side by 0.1 and divide the right side by 0.1. I think it's important to make sure that your math skills are really good at this. So I'm going to give you more details. I need more space. Now I divided both sides by 0.1. Let me show you how to simplify that. When I divide something it's this term minus this term, both of those terms get divided by 0.1. So I'm going to rewrite that here. Starting over here, 0.1 divided by 0.1, that equals 1, and it cancels out. So I get D equals, make sure you can do this and follow along. Oops. D equals on the left side of the equation. And then I'll write this out really carefully. 12.5 divided by 0.1 minus 0.25 times Q divided by 0.1. So let me say again what I want to make sure you know how to do. If you divide two of the terms by 0.1, it means both terms get divided. So I separate it out like this. You can see 12.5 divided by 0.1 and negative 0.25 divided by 0.1. Okay, I want to make sure you see how I got that. Now do the division and I get 125 minus 2.5Q. Dun, 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 dun. Okay, it tells me complete the equation below, use Q as your variable. And I did. I used Q as my independent variable. It means input. I put in Q and I solve for D. So D is the output. independent variable? You're going to need to know what independent variable means, so please take notes right now. The input goes somewhere in the equation. That's the independent variable. And then what we're solving for is the output. That is the dependent variable. Okay, take notes and then submit your answer. Let's hope I got it right. 125 minus 2.5 Q. I typed it in. Oh, I got it right. Yay! I make mistakes all the time. Even though I'm good at math, I definitely make mistakes on my videos. That's why I'm in suspense too when I type it in. We started with this equation and we rearranged the equation to put it in terms of Q. So D equals something depending on Q. Let's keep going. Believe it or not, we're not even done yet. Now, question number 4. If Jada has 25 dimes, how many quarters does she have? Oh, this math is going to kill me today. Keep going in your math notebook. Okay, so if she has 25 dimes, then D equals 25. And write down the original equation again, 0.1 times D. Oops, I was about to write D, but that's 25. 0.1 and substitute in D equals 25 plus 0.25 Q equals 12.5. Now we want to solve for how many quarters she has. So solve for Q. 0.1 times 25 is 2.5. So I'm going to subtract 2.5 from both sides of the equation to cancel that term out. And I get 0.25 times Q equals 10. So if I divide both sides by 0.25, do you want me to show it? Okay, I'll show it. Divide both sides by 0.25, 0.25. Then I get, this cancels out, Q equals 40. Stop the video and make sure you can do the math. Don't be lazy and just see my answers and type it in. Sure, you'll get credit, and I'm glad you're listening to the video. That's definitely better than nothing, but you want to be able to do this and prove to yourself that I'm teaching you correctly. Next, if Jada has 30 dimes, how many quarters does she have? So D equals 30. What is Q? Write down the equation. 0.1 times 30 dimes, because I substituted in 30, equals plus 0.25 quarters equals 12.5. Solve for Q. Okay, 0.1 times 30 is 3, so I'm going to subtract 3 from both sides, and this term cancels out. I get 0.25 Q equals 9.5. So that's going to be 38 quarters. Q equals 38. You want to double check me? Okay, double check me. Anyway, 9.5 divided by 0.25. 38. I knew that. I still like using a calculator. Submit. Next problem. It asks you, is the number of quarters a function of the number of dimes? It means, does the number of quarters depend on the number of dimes? Sure it does. If there are more dimes, you'll have less quarters. If there are less dimes, you'll need more quarters. Yes, it depends on it. It's a function of the number of dimes. The next question is right here. If you answered yes, write a rule that starts with Q equals that says that you can use to determine the output number of quarters from a given input number of dimes. So I answered yes. Let's write the rule. And the output is Q. So since the output is Q, I know my equation is going to be Q equals. So what does the number of quarters equal? Okay, well, I can actually do this in my head. Her total amount of money is $12.50. How much of that is in quarters? Well, that's going to be minus the amount that is in dimes, which is 10 cents times the number of dimes. So 10 cents times the number of dimes is the value of her dimes. If you subtract that from the total amount, then the remaining amount must be in quarters. So divide the remaining amount by 0.25 to get the number of quarters. If you don't believe me, we can rearrange the equation and I can prove it to you. Anyway, I'm not going to enter my answer like this because of the large fraction. I'm going to have to simplify this. So 12.5 divided by 0.25 is going to be 50? Isn't it 50? I'm going to double check. 12.5 divided by 0.25. Yeah, 50. I knew that. Quarters equals 50. So that was 12.5 divided by 0.25. But I still have to divide the other term by 0.25 too. So 0.1 divided by 0.25. I'm not that good at decimals. I'm definitely using a calculator. 0.1 divided by 0.25 is 0.4. Okay, so the number of quarters depends on the number of dimes according to this expression. I'll type it in and test if I got it right. 50 minus 0.4D. Yeah. Oh, thank goodness I finished. That almost killed me. That was long. You know what? You can expect each lesson or each homework to take you about an hour. And that makes sense because normally we would be doing this in class together for an hour a day, 5 days a week. So don't complain that it's too long. This is normal, okay? What's not normal is asynchronous time and remote time on Wednesdays. Talk to you later. Bye.